There was a big city exploration session. Lots of talking, negotiating, meeting interesting and new people, and more than a little bit of shopping happened this week's episode. When last we left our heroes, the players had just finished up an adventure in the town of Glennon, having made peace between the town's local sawmill and outside the town's local dryad, who was very opposed to the sawmill. So they've negotiated a deal between them, and now are moving on to the large city of Riften, where the Duke sits in office. And they're going here to pass on some information to the Duke. They got to try to meet with him if they can. One of the players, Bria, the bard, has a connection with somebody in the Duke's house. Doesn't know how that person is related to or works for the Duke, but they are someone in House Argyle. And that is her patron, the person who is sort of paying her to go out and collect these stories and catalog what is happening out in the world. Her patron, Lady Valancourt. And so Bria is intent on heading to Riften to meet with her patron. Hildorn has also received a letter from the Wall where there are terrible war crimes happening. He needs to pass them on to the Duke because the Duke may or may not even know what's happening. And so he's going to try to pass this letter on if he can. Phaedra is interested in traveling with them still, and also wanting to see if she can get some better weapons and armor and things like that. And the big city is the place to go. So they all head out. They've arrived here in Riften, and it's quite a bit different than anything that they have been around before. They're not used to the big city vibes. So it was interesting them sort of getting their feet wet and meeting a bunch of people. It's always fun to introduce a different kind of a setting to players. You know, they've been on the road in swamps and wilderness and talking to dryads. Now let's shift really hard to a big urban city environment and slums and merchants and city squares and nobility and things like that. It's a definite change of pace. So the group goes and speaks to the local blacksmith and gets some, places some orders in, some custom stuff that they want to have worked on, and that's always a really interesting scene as players are trying to describe the really cool and crazy things that they want, and then try to figure out how much gold is this great axe that also can spray oil that will ignite. How much is that going to cost, and how expensive is it? How long is it going to take me to make? All of these things is an interesting proposition for a DM, but they go and they speak with the blacksmith and they get some information in town, and they finally receive word back from Lady Valancourt that she will see them. Bria passes on all of the information to her patron, and then they have some interesting one-on-one conversations where they're kind of getting on the same page. What's next? This is what happened in Glennon, and I resolved this story. Now what's next? The party is sort of trying to figure out where do we go from here. You know, there are bigger things going on, but we don't really know who's connected to what, and we're trying to gain information on all these different things. Knolls are in the area, and you know, we know about this Lord Lancaster guy but he's out east of the Wall. Like, so things going on in the world. Where can we direct ourselves to? Lady Valancourt is able to get them an audience with Duke Argyle, and Argyle takes the letter and processes it and says thanks, and you have proven to be good messengers, and also says, I heard that you were responsible for being involved in what happened in the town of Glennon. Is that true? And so the players sort of lay out what happened to the Duke. And the Duke appoints the players as knights errant, and this is sort of an interesting little process here, because I know the players don't want to be tied down. They don't want to say we have to live in Riften and do whatever we want. So they don't want to be like the King's Guard or whatever. But also being a noble, knighted as a noble, has some perks. Being part of an organization has some perks. I'm interested, and some of the players are interested in incorporating some of Matt Colville's Kingdoms and Warfare stuff, and so giving the players opportunity to sort of become their own domain and organization. This sort of starts with that, and so Knights Errant is a very interesting title. It means not errant as in to err and make mistakes, but errant as in going and doing errands. They are knights who serve a liege lord and go out and do things, and so it's basically knights, but you're adventurers. You get told sometimes, hey, go and do this thing. Otherwise, just be out in the world, keeping the peace, protecting people from bad guys and things like that. Bria the Bard made certain that she was not in this audience because Bria does not want to be tied down at all. And she knew, based on her conversation with her liege lady, Lady Valancourt, that the Baron might offer something like this, and saying no is a dangerous proposition. And so Bria decided to avoid it altogether and not be part of the meeting. Everybody else was offered the role of knights errant, and they accepted. So Hildorn, Phaedra, as well as the NPC wizard Ezra, are now all knights errant, working for Duke Argyle, but also able to go where they want, when they want, to some degree. So that bit of freedom, but also doors being opened, is an interesting sort of proposition for players to be able to have. Now here's where things get a little more interesting. The Baron said, listen, now that you're knights errant, I have a task for you. I need you to go to the town of Bullridge. There was a Baron there. I'm hearing all kinds of mixed reports, but basically from what we can gather, there was some kind of horrifying attack, not from, marauding orcs and not from another rival Baron, but from monsters of some kind. Demons, maybe devils, horrifying creatures from what we're hearing. And the Baron is dead. But other than that, we don't really know that much. Part of the town was destroyed. Some people are alive, some people aren't. I need you to go to the town of Bullridge and figure out what happened. What was actually at play? How did the Baron die? Who attacked the town? Where did they come from? Where did they go? Why haven't we seen them since? This is kind of the middle of the nation of Haven. We would have seen a large host of demons walking through, right? Where did they come from? And they disappeared just as quickly. Where are they now? Also, they were heard chanting a word or a phrase or a name that didn't mean anything to anyone, but does it mean anything to you? The word is Andak. And of course, this does mean something to the players. They fought a band of gnolls and heard that there was some master over the gnolls, a creature called Andak. And they don't know who they are or what they are, but this creature is east of the wall and is sort of taken over the gnolls and sent out various war bands and war parties to do warband things. And so the players have heard, okay, there's this name has popped up once again. Yeah, let's go figure out what this Andak name has to do with what happened in the town of Bullridge. But first, we need to sort of make sure we have all of our gear and stuff like that. So this was a lot of negotiation and conversation. This actually happened a couple weeks ago because the next week, Virgil, Phaedra's player, was not able to meet, and so Hildorn and Bria sort of got together for a little, 0.5 session and got up to some hijinks in the city. That was really fun and interesting. They were sort of killing time, waiting for some of their gear to be finished, being custom made. And one of the things that's interesting there is just that ability to play without all of your players present. And so what do you do? And that's always an interesting proposition for a DM. To answer that question, normally I'm running for groups of 5 or 6, and so I'll say basically as long as I can get 3 or 4 players, we're gonna play. And so if you're not there, then you're sort of rolling all 2s. Everything that you are exceptional at, you're able to pick. Like a rogue who's missing is able to sneak over there and grab that thing. It's an easy thing for a rogue to do. The wizard is able to cast their identify spells or whatever, but they're missing with all of their attacks and they're getting saved against all of their spells, and so nothing is really happening unless another player wants to run that character. That's possible, but that almost never happens. And so for the most part, I just say, you're just not here, you're not going to die, and you're not going to contribute anything to the group, but we're going to keep playing without you. But with only 3 players, that's a lot harder to do. When you lose a third of your whole party, that is more difficult to sort of pull together. Only 2 players left. So It was fortunate that we were in a city and they were able to sort of go off and everyone go do your own thing, have your own conversations. Hildorn went out and was trying to find if there were any like illegal animal fighting rings, because he's a nature-y ranger dude and would want to break up that like illegal dog fighting type situation. He did find an illegal fighting group, and there were 2 velociraptors actually fighting, because I just think it's going to be cooler than like something they could find in the real world. Like, oh, it's 2 dogs fighting. That's lame. Let's get some cool D&D creatures in here. Let's get an owl bear fighting pit. Like, that's awesome. So it was actually really interesting, his situation. He tried to intimidate and scare and bully this one fighter out of the business, and he sort of succeeded. The guy sold off all of his animals in the middle of the night and took his family and ran. Apparently Hildorn did too good a job of intimidating him. So we will see if that guy makes a return appearance at any point. So the group has their sort of their stuff all together, and they've sort of been given a final charge by the Duke. And they say, again, I need you to go to Bullridge, and you need to find out exactly what happened. And I want you to tell me who is competent enough to take over. The Baron had no heirs, had no spouse, had no anything, so I need to appoint a new Baron. I need you to tell me who would be best for Bullridge. I know some things. I'm hearing some various sources of information, but you're going to be my boots on the ground, and I'm going to see what you have to say. If for any reason you feel like you need some different support and aid and power, I know of a tomb between here and there. There's a tomb of Ribald of Pelenthros, and supposedly there are, items of value and powerful in nature that have never been recovered from the tomb of Ribald of Pelenthros. It's just a legend, but if you wanted to check it out, it's on your way. And this was an interesting situation because Bria, the bard, obviously knows all sorts of folklore information, knowledge, and histories, and myths, and legends, and things like that. And so a natural question is, Bria asks me, well, who is Ribald of Pelenthros? Do I know that story? Am I familiar with who this person is? And that's where I got to give Jimmy, playing Bria, a bit of narrative control, because I said, well, Ribald is a knight of the heathen kings of old. What else do you know about Ribald? And and this is something that Jimmy and I have talked about before, that he is interested in doing this kind of thing. All of my players, again, are DMs, and so giving them a little bit of narrative control, you've just failed on this thing. You describe to me how you failed on this skill roll, because they all have those muscles already, and it's fun and engaging with the players to get to do that. I know I really love doing that as a player, and I want to give that ability to my players as well. And so I sort of say, hey, Jimmy, you tell me, what's the story of Ribald of Pelenthros? And he came up with a great legend about how he was part of this like Arthurian Knights of the Round Table group, all loyal to this one heathen king of old, and the king's wife got sick with something, and the king sent all the knights out into the world, but Ribald refused to go and said the cure would be found here at home, and was imprisoned for refusing, escaped, explored, found an old hermit druid who was able to give him some black magic tips to be able to do these things and save the king's wife, and all of these things done in secret and terrible cost and black magic and all sorts of scary, sad things, very like Witcher 3-esque in my opinion. And went on this whole thing, and he was buried in an unmarked tomb, and his followers found and exhumed him and interred him in some place where he could have a resting place of honor. That's why nobody has really found or messed with the tomb that much, is because it's haunted by this guy who blah blah blah. And Jimmy was making all this stuff up. It was great. And I passed him a message on Discord while he was telling his story. I was like, hey, by the way, this is a great story, and the heathen king of old that he served was named Lancaster. And so it sort of ties it back into some of the stuff they were already doing. And I had sort of ideas for what this tomb was going to be, because clearly next session is the players clearing out this tomb and maybe getting some magic items, because they expressed some interest in going here. But I didn't know all of the backstory behind it. I hadn't invented all of this information about Ribald of Palanthros. I just knew he was some knight somewhere who had a tomb and he had some magic items in it. And it was very cool getting to take all of the stuff that Jimmy was saying and putting it into this dungeon as I'm preparing it. And I just think that's a really cool thing, is if you can get your players kind of in on it to create some of the backstory in the world themselves, it feels even more real to them. And you can chime in with things to correct and guide and things like that, saying the heathen king of old is a landcaster. I added in that his followers exhumed him and put him in another unmarked grave site, so people didn't know where it was. And you can sort of collaborate in that way with your players on storytelling. And so if there are beats that you are okay with not being exactly and specifically right, like if it's your main story, it needs to be a certain way, that's one thing. But this little side quest, this tomb, this is a great opportunity to give players some narrative control and say, oh, cool, this is what was going on, and let me come up with this cool legend. That's part of the draw for Jimmy as a bard player. And so I think this is a really cool example of that going really well in my last session. So next, the players are off to this heathen king of old, loyal knight, Ribald of Palanthros. They're going to clear out his tomb, get some magic items, and head on to the town of Bullridge to see what's been going on here. But thank you all for listening. I hope you got some really interesting and useful story and lessons from this episode. I'll see you next time.